I'm a guy that's 24. Each day I build some more. I like episode 7 and episode 8. I'm Rich Boy J. Hello boyos, Rich Boy J here, back in with another video, and this is going to be the Starkiller based mock build series episode 35. This has to be one of my favorite updates I've ever done for anything ever. Like, there are just so many cool, unique things about this episode. You guys are not going to want to miss it. But before I get into that, I do want to give a very special thanks to those of you who donated via the live stream this week. So shout out to MavBrickz, Alex McBrick, Xavier Sorrent, TUFAB, Matthew T, Maxwell Green, aka ShadowBrick, Lord of Brix, and of course Lego Soldier 82, the boyo of all boyos. But like I said, this episode is so exciting. I've tried out some new building techniques that I've actually not seen anywhere else before, so I hope you guys get a kick out of that. And I also built a big Snoke. I built a big Snoke. You gotta see Big Snoke. Let's get right to it. The theme of this section of the mock so far has been coming up with some new techniques, really pushing the boundaries of what I've done so far. So I'm actually going to start off with some rock work. The rock work is obviously very important to Snoke's throne room. There's tons of rock work all around, and I wanted to try something a little bit different. My go-to technique for rock work up until this point has pretty much just been using the 1x2x3 slopes. Got one of those right here, along with some 1x2 slopes, and just kind of stacking them, staggering them a little bit to create a bit of detail. And this works pretty well for like mountains and such, things that have a natural slope to them. However, I realized when starting to work on this specific section that it's not exactly what I want. The wall is mostly flat, right? So I want to be able to convey the aesthetic of rock work without having to have things, have to slant forward and backwards just to make a general wall that goes straight up. So I figured, why not just try something entirely different? And I actually came up with what I think is a pretty cool technique. So just to give you guys first a little reference, this is a shot from Battlefront 2 of Starkiller. You can see there's a slight slant to these walls, that's just the way they are in this room, but in general the wall goes straight up, so I don't want to have to use slopes that go either direction and have to keep alternating them just to get something that looks like a wall that goes straight up. So what I actually came up with was a small prototype, and this is actually it right here. What I was really going for was kind of the cracked desert technique. Usually you'll see something like this sitting on the ground of a MOC, and people will just kind of set them in wherever. And I think most notably, David used something similar to this in his crate MOC. And I decided, let's take that, but make it vertical, because I think you can get a lot of the nice cracks and crevices in the rocks and really make it look jagged, really make it look like rocks. And of course, the best part of this is it goes straight up, but still preserves, I think, the rock aesthetic. So I was actually super happy with the way that this came out. If you guys are curious as to how this even works, the back section is just all these rail pieces, and I basically use clips to attach these sections. So you can see, I can actually pull one of these off and get a better look. These are all just clipped in there, and it's kind of a difficult process because you basically have to, start with one section and then build around it. I mean, there's no simple way to plan this out. You just kind of have to go by ear and then, attach them as you see fit, and then hope everything ends up working out in the end. I really do like this technique quite a bit. We're obviously going to need to make it much larger for the Snoke room, but I think I'm actually going to keep this prototype around because for the rooms, the smaller rooms where, there's rock work but not giant walls, I'll still want to use a technique like this. So I think this looks very nice. So let's see how this looks if we try to scale this up a bit. Oh my God. This was so much work, so much more work than I thought it would be, but I am just in awe with how well this came out. This is the one section of the rock wall that's going to be installed in Snoke's room, and I just love the way this came out. One of the differences you'll notice between this and the smaller prototype I came up with is I used larger rock sections here, and it was really just because since the wall is much bigger, I basically wanted it to be obvious like what this was from far away, because the close-up, the smaller walls, you can kind of get away with having a lot of these smaller sections, but if I were to like try to do this and scale it up on the bigger section of the wall, I don't know if it would be as obvious that it's rock work. I don't think it would look as nice. So I scaled it up quite a bit, not too much. I think it still maintains a lot of the details that you would want in something like this, but I think it just came out so nicely. Let's take a closer look at it. So you guys can probably tell that I exhausted a lot of my dark bluish gray slopes. I have, you know, a decent amount of some of them, but this was basically the stopping point I hit. Not even just because of the slopes, but actually the clip pieces that end up holding this wall into the rails on the backside. You end up using so many of those to make this wall a possibility, and I just ran out. I thought I ordered a lot. I apparently didn't, and I ran out. So I have another order on the way, but in terms of the actual details I incorporated here, this was like an interesting and kind of fun thing to do, just because, you know, you end up having to come up with some unique ways to, you know, get these sections to all come together. I think, like, I mean, I realize, you know, certain slopes go well together, other slopes don't go so well together. I realized kind of how to make something like this flow pretty well. I love that I actually used the black bricks behind it. That was actually a deliberate thing to, you know, give the shadows that are hidden behind it, just to really enforce the cracks and crevices between them, to make it to where, like, you know, if you're looking at it from far away, you can still very clearly see the cracks and crevices there. That was actually super important, especially since the room itself is going to be so dark. You hopefully would want, you know, those detail sections to shine through pretty well. Speaking of darkness, one of the cool things that is actually going to be installed in this room are lights down here. There's basically going to be red lights glowing up from underneath here, and it should illuminate at least the bottom half of these rocks. So I'm very interested in seeing how that actually comes across when the actual MOC is built. If you guys just want, you know, a look at how these sections come together, it's the same way as the prototype. They're all just basically clipped in. What I ended up doing was actually creating basically just a grid of these 1x8 bricks or 1x8 plates rather, with the rails sticking off of them. I don't know, you can probably tell more easily that way. And if you flip around to the back, you can see there's a lot of those. This entire section, it's built on its side, and that was kind of necessary to get this to come together as well as it did. But I like doing it this way because it just gave me more options and variability with having things, you know, placed vertically. Like, it just gave me a little bit more freedom with doing that. I don't know if it's obvious why that's the case, but hopefully you guys can understand why that would be the case. One other thing I implemented are the pipes here in the middle of the wall. You can see I just used some Technic connector pieces, nothing too complicated right there, and I actually used the lightsaber hilt pieces and that flat silver color to just really break up a little bit of the monotony of the color. I initially had just the standard gray ones there, and I was like, you know what, I can probably make that a little bit more interesting. So I went with the flat silver ones, and I think that those look pretty good, and I think they'll especially look good with the red light reflecting off of them once those are installed down there. So enough talking about this just rock section by itself. Let's go ahead and put it in the MOC and see how it looks. Oh yes, this is exactly what I wanted. Oh man, this is so freaking cool. I love the way those rocks look right there. I obviously have a lot more of them left to build, but for now, I will appreciate the fact that at least one of these walls are done, and I pretty much have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more of them to go. Awesome. This wall took such a long time to build, but now that I have, you know, a good idea of how all these sections need to come together, I'm hoping it'll progress a little bit more smoothly and quickly as I build more and more of them. But this might be quite a prolonged section of the MOC because of that. But one of the things I really do like is how the rock work looks between the two pillars right there, and especially like once those get built up. all around the MOC. I think it's going to look incredible, and it'll look more seamlessly integrated into the build. Right now, it's actually not connected to anything. I'm actually just going to leave that as it is. Once I get more of the stuff built up around it, I'll have a better idea for different connection points I can use, and then I can, just permanently install it into the build. But like I mentioned earlier, I pretty much hit a standstill. Like, I literally just ran out of the clip pieces that I need to build these, so I'm currently waiting for those. Hopefully they'll be in a decent amount of time so I can get some rock work done for the upcoming week's episodes. But if that's not going to be the case, if I have to wait a while, there are plenty of other things I can work on. Specifically, I need to build up these pillars going all around the build. I also need to work on the walls that are going to be facing out this way, because there's basically, as this section kind of slides into the rest of the builds, I want to basically just build up walls that go right here, and this is basically going to be a big cutout where you'd look into this section of the build. And then finally, there's going to be rooms above this, so I need to make sure that that is actually stable. So I'm going to go ahead and work on a few of those things, and I'll be right back. Alright, this is a little bit of a surprise. I honestly was not planning on working on this at all for this week's video, or really anytime soon. I initially thought this would probably be one of the last things I would build for this room, just to kind of really bring the room all together. But I just started working on the head. I don't know what it was, like just an idea of how to construct the head on Big Snoke came to me, and I was like, oh, I wonder what that would look like. And then as I started getting more and more of it built, I was like, oh, I got to see this thing come together. So I started working on the torso, started working on the arms, and then I ended up with a pretty final model of the large Snoke hologram that's going to be in this build, and I love it. It looks creepy, it looks terrifying, and that was exactly what I was going for. I based it pretty faithfully off of the minifigure here, so you can see this is little Snoke. Then we got his buddy Big Snoke over here. I used that 1x1 curved tile, the quarter circle tile, to represent the large, how would you describe the large scar on his forehead? I think scar is honestly an understatement, but it came out pretty well. I also used the 1x2 curved slope with the cut edge on it to kind of represent the large chunk of his jaw that is just missing. So I think that actually came out pretty well. One thing I really like about this build is it's a good balance between, having him be a Lego minifigure, but still incorporating like decent details, right? Because one of the things I thought about when first building this figure was, how would I do the face? Like, maybe I'll just have someone custom print a big version of this face on a sticker and then use it on here. But once I started kind of tinkering around with it and realizing there's a lot of really useful pieces I can use to just brick build the face, I realized that that was absolutely the way to go. I love the way his eyes came out. I thought the jumper plate right there worked very well for his mouth. Like, that's honestly kind of surprising how well that worked out. The torso detail was super fun to do. It was kind of a complicated assembly to come up with, but you can see he's sporting his pimp robe as he's sporting on the Lego minifigure, and then I even incorporated some 2x4 tiles to represent the belt on his torso, so those actually came up pretty nicely. The arms were pretty complicated to come up with because I wanted to have them at a slight bend similar to how the minifigure arms are, and just getting the scaling and the curves to all work out was a bit difficult, but actually I'm super happy with the way it came out. They do actually rotate a little bit. I don't know if you can actually, it's basically just like a one stud connection, so I don't know if it could hold itself up. Oh, maybe it can. There you go. Boom. Snoke is sitting with his arm up. And the hands too were very fun to work on, specifically because they just really make the model come together. Like, that Lego claw design was pretty essential to get correct if I was gonna really have this design come together, and I like the way it looks. The one thing that I'm not completely sold on at the moment are the legs. I feel they're too narrow, and I'm kind of torn with how I want to do this. Basically, like, with the way that I designed it, I don't have very many options insofar as like making them thicker or more narrow because I'm using bricks. So like, his body is basically an 8x8 at the torso. So at the very bottom, it's 8 studs, and if I want to have 2 legs that are the same size, I either do each be 4 studs or each be 3 studs. Now when they reach 4 studs, It's around the right size, but the issue is they touch each other, and the Lego legs clearly don't do that. There's that gap between the thighs. So if I do the 3x3, it's not ideal either because there's too much of a gap, and I actually even had to offset it a bit from the sides of the torso just to actually get this to look decent. So right now, this is what I'm going to settle on. Once I build more of the throne, I'll have a better idea of how the entire assembly goes together. But we'll just have to see. We'll have to see how this comes out. Like, the legs don't look terrible. I just think they're slightly more narrow than they should be. So it's something I'll probably have to put some thought into and see what I end up coming up with. But I'm super excited to have this thing built. Let's go ahead and see what this thing looks like on the actual MOC, guys. Okay, this is it. This is exactly what I imagined. This is even better than what I imagined when first coming up with the designs for this room. This is just perfect, in my opinion. This looks so good, in my opinion, having the big Snoke there on his throne, looking down at the puny Kylo Ren. He fits pretty well on this base. I don't know if that's going to be the case when I actually build up more of the throne that he's sitting on, but I think just the size of him in this room actually looks pretty incredible, and just, I love this so much. This brings back so many memories of sitting in that theater for the first time, seeing big Snoke and being like, oh my god, is he actually going to be that big? Please, Disney, don't do it. And then you find out he's a hologram. Very funny stuff from Disney right there. But this is it. This is how the room is looking so far. I think the rock work and Snoke both really help to tie this room together. Once we get more of that rock work done, it'll look even better, and I'm just super stoked about this room. I think this is really one of the coolest things I've ever built, just with the various designs and techniques that I'm using. Like, this thing is going to look so good once it all finally comes together. Like, even with the rock work, I just can't get over how nice that looks. I mean, I kind of want to take credit for it because I've certainly never seen anyone else use this design, at least for rock work. But I mean, so many people have built so many MOCs over time. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if someone else had done something like this before that I just had never seen. But I like it. Like, this is an idea that I implemented, I kind of came up with, and built it at a much larger scale than my prototype, and it just ended up working out, which was nice because when you do something like that, it's a bit of a risk. You just don't know if it's going to look good, and you don't know if you wasted your money buying all these parts. But I think this was time well spent. I think this was money well spent, and I'm going to keep investing money into this to build more of those wall sections. So that's pretty much going to finish up what we had for this week. I was really hoping to get more rock work done, but I just wasn't able to. I literally used all the parts that I needed for those clips on this just one section right here. So that gave me a pretty good idea of how many more I'm going to need. And hopefully we won't run into that problem anymore in this series. So let's go ahead and go to the end of the video, guys. And that's going to finish up this week's episode, guys. Let me know in the comment section below what you thought about it. I am so stoked with this MOC right now. Specifically, this section of the build is just coming together so well. There's so many details. There's new build techniques that I've never done before. It's little things that I've never even seen before implemented into MOCs. So once this room comes together, it is truly going to be something special. So between now and next update, what I'm primarily going to be working on is hopefully getting those clip pieces in so I can continue doing rock work. If that's not the case, if I have to wait for a prolonged amount of time for those to come in, because you just don't know with certain orders right now when you're actually going to get them. I still have other things to work on, like building up the pillars that are just going around the actual throne room. I also have the walls on the front of the throne room to work on, and if it ends up being the case that I just can't do any of the rock work or not a significant amount of it, I may actually just move on to working on more rooms in the build. So that could potentially be exciting. So next week, you guys are either going to get a significant amount of rock work done, or going to see some new rooms altogether come together. So very exciting things coming up with this MOC. But that's all I got for you guys this week. Thanks for watching. If you like what I do, go ahead, support the video by hitting the like button, support the channel by smashing that subscribe button, and I'll be back again very soon.